Well, hello and welcome to the Edgewood 4G podcast. My name is Kyle Parks. I'm the discipleship pastor here. And today I'm with Micah Kongkousonh, our youth assistant.
Yep.
And so you've been on staff for how long now, is it?
I was 1 day short of a month last time. Now I'm, I think, a week short of 5 months.
Okay, coming up on 5 months. Sounds good. But yeah, the 4Gs, gather, grow, give, and go with the gospel. That's what we're all about here at Edgewood. So thanks for tuning in today, whether you're listening or you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook. We want to get into a conversation, Micah, today about Gen Z and the following generation after Gen Z, which is Gen Alpha, I believe. Yeah. And I just learned about that recently. I guess my children would be in that. I'm a part of the millennial generation. And so, we have Youth Weekend coming up. We do this every year. And so as I was a youth pastor a couple years back, every year I really look forward to this weekend. And now I still look forward to it because our students are basically running everything. Pastor Chris is preaching, so I know you're involved with some of that. So, yeah, we want to have a conversation today just about what God's doing in the younger generations. And excited about that. So we'll hit on stuff like revival, but then we'll talk about things like smartphones and social media and mental health and obviously how the gospel can change and shape people's lives. And that's really what's needed in this younger generation. But first off, Micah, let's just start here. What do you see God doing among your generation? So think kind of people your age, and then we'll kind of follow it up with like the student ministry that you're working with. So what do you see God doing with like the young adults that we work with, especially like in our mainspring ministry?
Yeah, for sure. I see a lot of generationally, not even necessarily locally, but generationally, Gen Z. We've got a lot of people who are trying to figure stuff out. There's a lot of turmoil with that around the world. There's identity issues, mental health, stuff like that.
We're seeing all this play out right now on college campuses right now, especially.
Absolutely. But at the same time, there's a lot of people locally who are coming to Christ, and they're seeing that there's fullness that comes from Christ. Yeah. And that's always exciting. But I really don't know where it's coming from because we're very stubborn, but we also want to do things our way. So somewhere down the line, they're choosing to come to church. They're choosing that. And I mean, I have parents that helped me want to do that, but not everyone does that. And so there's people that come from different places at Mainspring. Yeah. I think we're at one of the most mixed periods of it I've ever seen. It's not people that have just come from Edgewood. There's people from Geneseo and even further, I think. But it's a whole lot of people that are searching for God, and whatever their reason is, it's really exciting to see them searching for that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think people are searching for truth, and the word that comes to mind for me I think a lot of people in this younger generation is like disillusionment. Yeah. Like they're disillusioned with just like the world and politics and the wars are going on, and they're thinking, is this it? Like, is this all there is to life? It's just kind of a chaos. Yeah. And so they're searching for truth. They're searching for meaning and purpose. And identity is huge, right, in this generation. Who am I? That question. And so people are really looking, and God is using that, I believe, to draw people to himself. And we're seeing people come from all over the place and seeing the ministry grow. And so, you're part of that ministry, but then you help lead the student ministry. And so what kinds of things are you seeing there, God doing, and kind of maybe the younger portion of Gen Z, but then also maybe the junior hires who are in like that Gen Alpha? What are you seeing God do there? Yeah,
this is the first year I've had both Gen Z and Gen Alpha as their age goes to. And so right now I currently have a group that is split. But what's encouraging is that they're still just students. They still play with each other and have fun. And I mean, one or two might have a phone when I wouldn't at that age, but they're not always on it, and they're engaged with each other. They have fun. And then they're also at that age where they're being fed the gospel instead of necessarily seeking it out always themselves. There's some that might, but at that age, they're really just trying to exist. They're trying to go about school, and they're balancing that. They're getting ready to head into high school.
Yeah.
And so around high school is when they start really choosing to follow Christ. But some of them are already doing that now.
Right.
That's super encouraging.
Yeah, there's a shift that takes place with, being told you're going to go to church, or maybe even forced to go when they're kids or junior high. But then making this decision when they're starting to be able to drive and getting closer to that college age, and they continue to want to go, to want to show up, because I think that community and relationships are huge for that generation. And just seeing God move, they want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. I think that we've seen there authentic relationships. You talked about earlier how just and meeting them where they're at.
Yeah.
Like I think there's this idea when it comes to church, like, oh, I need to get my act cleaned up, or, if I've made some poor decisions, I shouldn't go to church, or I shouldn't come around. But no, like, let Jesus clean you up. He'll meet you where you're at, and we'll do the same. We're going to love you like he loves us. And so, that's really cool to see how God's working in that generation. It's really cool that you're a part of it.
I think any kind of ministry needs for leaders to meet people where they're at. Yeah. So you do that with Mainspring. You consistently come and learn about Gen Z, and that's something that seems like you're very passionate about. Yeah. For junior high as well, that's where I teach, and so I have to come and reach them with less expectations than I would for a high schooler Mainspringer. Right.
Exactly. So, meeting them where they're at.
Yeah, and so I come in, and I'm like, sometimes what's best is just being there, and they get to see a face that they're familiar with, and then they get to grow.
So you're saying every time you sit down with junior high, you don't have a deep theological conversation?
Not every time.
You might just tonight talk about video games or whatever they're like into at the time, but build those relationships.
I think last time I was on the podcast, I was like, some days we just come in and talk about Minecraft. But I mean, then the next week they come in, they're just like, man, I hate that I sin and I want to stop doing that. And I realize that I sin and I don't want to do that. How do I stop that? And I'm like, wow, deep question.
Yeah, a big shift from last time.
It's always something new.
That's good. Well, I know at the church, but especially in these ministries, we've been talking about revival for a while. We've been seeing that, I think, to some degree. And these different ministries. And, one of the things that you hear about is a lot of times revivals, they really begin with the younger generations. But I think they continue when the intergenerational ministry kind of takes place. And we talked about that earlier. We can maybe get to that a little later on.
Absolutely.
But one of the things that is important to understand with revival isn't just this having a mountaintop experience. That you can have that at camp or a mission trip or whatever, but for revival to be truly revival is for it to continue on. And so one definition from a pastor is something like this, is when the ordinary operation of the Spirit is intensified through ministry. And just the ministry of the Word, the ministry of prayer, the ministry of shepherding. And that is just intensified. And people are actually reading the Word for themselves. They're praying. They're practicing the spiritual disciplines. Yeah. And so asking that question, are you willing to do whatever it takes to see that and be a part of that, to rid yourselves of distractions in your life? And so, we got into this a few weeks back with our Mainspring Young Adults Ministry and really hitting on that revival. If you really want to see revival in your life, you're going to have to make some changes in your life. You're going to have to allow God to shape you from the inside out. Yeah. And so one of the things we put before people is talking about doing like a digital fast to rid yourself of distractions for a time in order to use that time to draw closer to God. And so right now, social media and smartphones really rule the world. Let's be honest with people, with a lot of people. Their lives are lived out online, relationships, everything is done and consumed in entertainment on those platforms. And so I shared some statistics just to help people understand like how much it really affects their lives, and maybe more so than they think. But the average Gen Zer spends 8 hours a day, or spends up to 8 hours a day on their phones. We touch our phones up to 2,000 times a day. Think of all the times we click like or swipe or just pick it up. We check our phones, actually check to see what it is, that notification, an average of 144 times a day. So that's every 5 minutes throughout the entire day we're checking it. So think of like the video platforms like YouTube and TikTok. We scroll through those at a rate now so quickly that a lot of the videos we don't even like, so we'll just scroll right past it. We'll watch the first 2 or 3 seconds. We're like, oh, that's boring. Then finally we'll come to a video after 9 or 10 scrolls that we finally want to watch. And so what's happening to our attention spans? Our attention spans have been lessened to 8-9 seconds, they're saying now. And that's really low. That's
very low.
It's just kind of a
goldfish.
yeah. They say the goldfish is 8 seconds, and so they're doing a little better than we are. But because of that, there's pervasive boredom that takes place. I mean, how many people when on their phones look like they're actually having a good time? No, they're a lot of times sitting in the corner. They're just kind of mindlessly scrolling, looking for something, anything to entertain them. But if you think about this, smartphones came out about 10 years ago or so. I mean, to the effect that everybody was really getting into them at that time. But that's also about that time 10 years ago is when the mental health crisis really started to skyrocket. Not just younger generations, but with all generations. So in the last 10 years, mental health stuff has gone way up. Suicide rates have been up 30%. People dealing with anxiety and depression, that has skyrocketed and gone up. And for those people who spend 5 or more hours a day on their phones, they're 2 times more likely to show depressive symptoms. So there is definitely a huge connection between these things. And some people, actually said that 57% of young adults are self-diagnosed as addicted to their smartphones and to social media. They're kind of making that call for themselves and saying, hey, this is something I'm struggling with. But then at least 33 million Americans say that they're addicted to social media. And so when you hear those numbers, Micah, like when you think about that, like what do you think? Like what kind of thoughts come to mind? And I don't know, how does someone like you take those numbers and really think like, all right, what do we do with this? Like, how big of a problem really is this?
I can't fix anything that big, but those numbers are big.
Yeah. Mind-boggling.
They're worrying. I don't know. We can tell people, hey, get off your phones, but then we sound like a cranky old man telling people what to do.
Yep.
And so I think there's merit to how people like Pastor Brian, he tells me even, because I'm not on it as much, but he'll be like, hey, sometimes it's a ministry opportunity to be on there. I think your family came by once and was talking about their ministry and their kids, and then they had mentioned some kind of story where their son was like, I think this is the way of the future for some ministries. And they're like, that's kind of scary that our son is wanting this.
Right.
But then they realized that there is merit to evangelizing through the tools that we're given.
Yeah.
I don't think phones and computers are going to go away.
Right.
We had people back when we were going from chalkboards to paper that were saying that paper is never going to last. What happens when you run out of paper? Right, yeah. And now we're going from paper to technology. Yeah. And so I don't think it's going anywhere, and I think there's benefit to it being something that we use for school and work.
Yeah.
That's what I use it for. I do use it for entertainment, but I feel like making sure it doesn't take up too much of my life is something that's very important to me.
Yeah, that's good.
And so using it for the right reasons, I think, is the most we can do. Revival, we just draw a circle around ourselves and ask God to revive whoever's in that circle. And that's the best we can do sometimes, besides just praying for things to change globally.
Yeah. No, that's
at work.
Yeah, that's really good. It starts with us. And I think you hit on this, and I talked about this when we first got into this whole idea of a digital fast, is that, do you see your phone in your hand? Is it a tool that you use to communicate with people and to use to, do stuff with work or school or whatever? Sure, there's going to be some entertainment, but are you able to control that, or is it become more of an idol in your hand? Yeah. Something that you can't live without, something that you're literally addicted to. So just like many things, it can be used for good or bad, but it's not necessarily neutral because it is shaping your life in some way. And so for a lot of people, they're not knowing how to understand how to use it in a way that it's not going to control them.
If we look at it like an addiction, I mean, people are addicted to alcohol, and it's said that it's not necessarily a problem if you're not getting drunk, but if you can't deal with it in moderation, then it becomes a sin. So we have to be sure not to let it become an addiction. They diagnose themselves with that as an addiction. And
a lot of people do. Because they know it's a problem.
They know it's a problem.
But then not knowing what to do about it and how to go about it. And so I think the interesting thing is, and so, doing this as a group, kind of doing this fast, I'd heard some different people talk about this more. I read a book on it, listened to some podcasts, and even this isn't just Christians talking about this. Like people who deal with mental health stuff, psychologists, like they're very concerned for especially the younger generations. One of these guys' names is Jonathan Haidt. He's a social psychologist, not a believer, but he wrote a book recently that came out called The Anxious Generation. And in this book, he advocated for 4 things, and he says, this is what he puts out there and encouraging people to do. No smartphones before high school for teenagers. No social media before 16. Phone-free schools. I mean, just get them out. Just don't allow kids to bring them or take them up until the end of the day. And then the last thing, more independence, free play, and responsibility in the real world, especially for kids. Like going back to when we were kids where we just went outside, we played all day. And, maybe our mom and dad didn't always know where we're at every single second of the day. And I know times have changed. Things are different today. You have to be careful. But just not kind of doing that helicopter parenting, not hovering over your kids, allowing them to play by themselves with other kids, allowing them to fail, allowing them to experience life and deal with the consequences, but also the triumphs and tragedies of life with some of the decisions that they make. And so it was just very interesting to hear that. But what he talks about in the book is a collective action problem. And so if this is a problem that we're dealing with as a society, then the best way to deal with it is as a group of people. And so if you do like a fast or you do this with a group of people, then it's going to be much easier than doing it on your own. Okay, so, you hear, I've heard students say, I would love to get off social media, but I could only do it if everyone else got off of it. Because everyone's on there. That's how they communicate with each other. And so then doing that. And so what we're doing here, with our mainspring ministry is a digital fast for 40 days. And we're not saying throw your phone away. We're not saying, don't be on anything. We want to stay connected to people, but really it's the time-wasting apps is what I've encouraged people to do. Get rid of those things that waste time, whether that be Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, the things that you're just scrolling on. You're not really gaining a whole lot of, maybe a few minutes or seconds of entertainment, but just using your phone as a tool to communicate, to use it for work, school, whatever that might be, educational purposes, the Bible app, learning and growing in those ways. But not being legalistic about it, right?
No.
But kind of a wisdom approach, like we see in Proverbs. But then also these verses from Psalms. Just this: I will not set before my eyes anything that is worthless. And so much of what we look at on social media is just worthless. Like it doesn't matter, and there's not a lot of good stuff out there, anyways. Another one, Psalm 119: turn my eyes from looking at worthless things. Psalm 16, I have set the Lord always before me because he has my right hand. I shall not be shaken. We want the Lord to be before us, not these phones in our hands that have literally become idols to many of us. And so thinking through that. And so with the digital fast, one of the things that was shared in the book was this. It says the ultimate goal of fasting is to increase our hunger for God and satisfy that hunger for him and our relationship with him. He's the only thing that can truly satisfy us, right? Like if we are created the God-shaped hole in all of our lives, like we're not going to be able to be filled with something that we find on our phones or social media or entertainment or that type of thing. So I've been doing this and my family. So what I've done, I've taken off some of those apps that are just kind of time wasters, things that we scroll on. Each night from 5 to 7, so after work, before the kids go to bed, my wife and I were just putting our phones completely away, and then we're just focused on being with the kids, for dinner and then playtime afterwards. So I'm using that time. And again, it's not just getting rid of that, but it's replacing with something else. I think that's the biggest part of a fast. So whether you're fasting from phone stuff or food or whatever, it's replacing that time you would be doing that thing with more time with God. So in the Word and prayer, time with other believers, those types of things. And so that's what I'm working on. And I know you aren't on social media a lot yourself, but what are some things you're kind of doing as far as the digital fast is going?
Yeah, I think most of my phone time goes to texting family, seeing what needs to be done for work and school. I use it for entertainment when there's time. Yeah. But I think just making sure that we have a vibrant prayer life, that we have a further connection with God, that we're building a relationship with Him further. If we already have those, then the fast is like something we can just look at where we have a spot in our life and then replace it with God. Yeah. Some people like the digital fast, that needs to be their phone. That's a major part of their life. 8 hours is a lot of time that we can put towards making a connection with God. Yeah. For me, I use my phone for entertainment, but I don't have that time scheduled. It's like 10 minutes before dinner or something. And then like a few hours after that. But then I pray and I read my Bible in the morning. But then I started realizing that I spend like 2 hours after I get ready for bed just reading a book.
Which isn't a bad thing.
No, not at all. But I wanted to take part in this fast, and I wanted to replace it with something that would further my connection with Christ. Yeah. And so I took that time and I turned it into another Bible and prayer time. Cool. And so that's what I've been doing. But I think whether it's digital or whatever other kind of thing it is, there's some ladies that mentioned this past Sunday that what they do is they replace a meal, which is more traditional, I guess. More
traditional type of fasting, yeah.
But they have a need. They see a spot that they can replace with time with God, and then they do that. And so whether it's digital, food, a book right before bed, replacing anything intentionally with time with God is something that He will honor.
Well, that's great, man. And yeah, part of this is kind of experimentational, but I don't want to put something out there and not do it myself, obviously. I'm going to practice what I preach, but then also I want to see that this is actually like getting the results that we're hopefully looking for. Yeah. And not just putting it out there and then just kind of leaving it. No, like what I've been doing each week is checking in. We have a messenger group with a lot of the people in Mainspring and just say, hey, how's it going? How's everybody's, the fast going for everyone? What are you learning? How God's growing you? And so I actually had several people write in to that. And so I wanted to share some of those. So from the first week, Christian said this. He's doing a social media fast. No Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, or Snapchat. YouTube only for educational purposes. I might even add more to the fast list if need be. Hopefully I can get a lot more reading, studying, and overall getting closer to God in the meantime. So that was the first week. The second week, he says this. It's finally starting to get much easier for me. The urge to jump on social is dwindling away. I'm also finding myself being explosively, that's a great word, more attuned to how God is working in my life and overall just much, much closer and connected to Him. A lot more praise and a lot more worship has been naturally occurring at this point. So that's like, it's actually working in this sense. Yeah. So we want to see like results, right? Kaylee said this the first week. I got rid of TikTok last week and hope to continue this week, and also am not using Instagram or Facebook. I want to use this time as well to get more into my Bible and continue with my journaling. And so, that's one of the things that we also talked about was being in the Word more and prayer more, but then also like being in community more. Communicating with other people in real life too, like getting together in person. But then the other thing I encourage people to do was to be more creative. We're all created in God's image, and so we're all creative in some way, some form of fashion, right? And so whether that's with writing or creating stuff via technology or photography, video, painting, whatever, lean into that. And take time to be creative. Yeah. And so to hear that she's doing some more journaling, I love to hear that. Anava said this, it's way easier to want to get out of my bed and read my Bible in the morning now. That's the main thing I've noticed, but the rest has been said. Ashton said this: I've been more focused on praying, and I felt happier and not as bored, especially with how much more I've been studying Scripture. I went through the book of Titus, he's getting specific here, and studied that over the weekend and got some good notes and takeaways from it as well. And then Adair said this: I noticed I only really use it for messaging now that he's doing the fast, especially if there are plans, if there's something necessary to look up, or Google or school, of course. Which school has not felt as rushed or daunting since cutting back on social, especially scrolling. Not as much overthinking in certain situations, as scrolling can sometimes have all these made-up scenarios that may cause overthinking. And so that's good. I think sometimes when we see stuff on social media, we compare ourselves to other people. We see other people's, posts, and we start overthinking things. We start thinking things about them, about ourselves. And in reality, a lot of those, feelings are unwarranted. I think we overthink things when we get on there and we start kind of finding our identity and those types of things. So I just love to see that. I love to hear that. So we've talked about, revival taking place, and one of the things that needs to happen is we need to get away from distractions in our lives and spend more time with God.
Yeah.
But you talked about earlier, intergenerational ministry. So yes, we see revival a lot of times start with the younger generations, but honestly, it's going to continue longer and into the future if there's intergenerational ministry taking place. If we're doing life with not just people our age, but with people all over the church and all age ranges and different groups. And so how do you do that, Micah? What are ways that you've been a part of that? What are ways that we can do a better job, bringing the generations together, do you think?
I think making it better is just acknowledging that your generation is just an age range, and it's not something that makes you better than anyone. Yeah. I see that with any generation. Yeah. Just making sure that there's no divisions among us that don't matter is important. I spent a lot of time at another church where I was part of the senior fellowship.
That's great, yeah.
And so there was people who had spent their lives already putting time and focus into making a relationship with God. And they were bringing that every week with the discussions, with the lessons. And I think that really helped me in my early journey with Christ. Yeah. And it also helped me want to join the youth ministry. At first, I had joined the youth ministry because I was only just out of junior high, and we had a split junior high and high school group. So I was a high schooler, and I'm like, I kind of want to help with the junior high. And so I helped in a second grade capacity, and then I graduated high school, and then I ended up being a leader at junior high. Okay. But I wanted to make sure that I was doing something with people who are younger than me as well as being with people who are older. I had people pouring into my life who are older than me, and I realized that I needed to do something in ministry because it pleases God. Yeah. The will of God is for him to be glorified. And so I wanted to glorify him in some kind of ministry capacity. And so at first it started with that being the only thing available to me, but I grew to love it, and wherever he has me, I will be content. Yeah.
That's great, man.
But yeah, you pour into your own children. My parents poured into me. Yeah. That's a ministry. Grandparents with grandchildren. Brian's on vacation right now, hanging out with his 3 boys, grandsons. Yeah. And that's super encouraging to see. Just people being there for other generations.
Yeah, I think when you can find ways to bridge that gap, it's really important. I know Chris has found times to bring the junior high and high school up to the Ed's ministry, the Second Winders Senior Adults Ministry. We've had different teenagers over the years serve in Second Winders luncheons and things like that. The class I teach is mostly senior adults, and it's helped me a ton to understand them better and have grown to love them in a much deeper way than I ever thought. And so I think, a lot of times with the generational gaps, these generations, they don't understand each other a whole lot, and they don't have a desire to bridge that gap. But then once you get a taste of it and you realize, wow, there's so much wisdom there, so much you can learn from the older generation, but also the older generation can learn from the younger generations in this day and age. Yeah. Because otherwise you're just going to have these ideas in your mind about what you think about those people, and you just put everybody in a box, right? But once you get to know them, their names, their stories, man, it just opens your eyes. And so I think that's really where we're going to see revival take place, is when the stuff from the younger generation and them really getting excited about spiritual growth, all that perpetuates into the other generations, and then they get on board and they say, hey, how can I help? How can I be a part of your spiritual growth?
Yeah.
And then we have things like intentional discipleship, where we have older believers discipling younger believers, and we want to see more of that take place. And so if you're listening or watching this and you're like, yeah, I really need to get involved with at least one ministry that's outside of my generation or my generational category, then talk to us. Talk to Chris about being involved with high school or junior high ministry. Talk to me about the young adults ministry. If you're younger, you can talk to us about getting involved with some of these older ministries. There's different ways, and so I think that's be a wonderful way to kind of go about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? Any other ideas of some things that we talked about today, and thinking of revival and fasting from things in order to see spiritual growth?
I think just meeting people where they're at is very important. Whether you're meeting someone older than you, your age, or younger, that's always super important. Making sure that you're providing something into the body of Christ. Yeah. You have a place in the body. You are supposed to use it. And so whether you're doing stuff, volunteering, joining an intentional discipleship, parent situation where you're pouring into your children, whether you work with someone or not, there's always someone that can be reached by the gospel, and making sure that we are looking for those opportunities and letting God use us as the body. Yeah. He is the head. He's looking around, and then we are to obey what he wants us to do.
Yeah, that's great, man. Yeah, this weekend, as we mentioned before, is Youth Weekend, and so it's going to be a great time to see our students serving all over the church, obviously the cafe ministry, but then also greeting and stuff with communion and in the band, and then Chris will be preaching. Yep. There'll be senior blessing videos done by parents, and so it's just a unique service. I think you'll really enjoy that, and again, we do this always the first weekend in May every year, but it's always a favorite of mine, always has been. And so looking forward to that. But I would encourage you, after hearing us talk about some of these things with revival and fasting from different things, maybe be asking yourself, what can I do in order to see more spiritual growth in my life? I often talk to people who kind of plateau or hit this wall in their spiritual growth. They're not really sure what they need to do next or how to grow. And honestly, there's a lot of things that we can do that we don't know how. And so you need to talk to somebody. You need to put some of these things into practice. Get rid of the distractions in your life, perhaps, so you can spend more time with God. But ultimately, what we want to do is pass on our faith. So many in the older generations just haven't really had much of an opportunity to do that because they don't know how to go about that. But we have means to do that here. You can serve in younger generational ministries. You can serve in intentional discipleship. And so if you've hit a place in your life, you're like, what's next for me? God, help me to know. Show me what that is. Well, I can tell you what that is. It's to pass on your faith to the next generation.
Absolutely.
And whether that's your own children and grandchildren or just people in your life, your friends, neighbors, the people here at church, we will help you find ways to do that. So come talk to us. We want to equip you in that endeavor for sure. But yeah, thanks so much for tuning in today. It's just been a fun conversation talking about stuff that's in our wheelhouse, but then also ways that you all can get involved. And if you have any more questions about a digital fast or how to implement some of these things into your life, it's working. It's helping our young adults grow in their faith. It's helping me, Micah, others who I've talked to about this. So be thinking, praying about that. Maybe God would have you to do something like this in order to grow more in your faith. But it's been great. Hopefully we can continue this conversation. Maybe we'll talk more about Gen Z next week. I'm going to be on here again. Pastor Chris is getting ready for Youth Weekend, so
maybe you'll get an update on that.
I know. Maybe we could have Chris on next week since he's diligently working on all that for this weekend. But once again, thanks so much for tuning in. If you are watching, if you are listening, please feel free to share this, subscribe to this podcast. You can leave us a rating and review. That helps it to get out there to more people. We want to continue to put out good content for our people. But then also friends of friends, people that you can share this with who are looking for some encouragement in their life. So once again, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.